You're listening to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa, and you just heard Carolina by musician, chef, and author Author-Susi-Gott-Seguret. And she is joining us today to chat about her brand new book. It's called Child of the Woods. This is such a beautiful collection of short stories from her life growing up in rural Appalachia. And I hope I'm saying Appalachia right. I heard that if you don't say Appalachia, they will throw an apple at you. That's what I've heard. I'm just saying. The book is published by Hatherleigh-Press, and it's available, of course, on Amazon, all those great places. But you can also go to Susi's website, which is susigott.com, and that's SUSIGOTT.com. So welcome, Susi. How are you?
Thank you, Lisa and Nancy. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and I am just doing dandy, sitting up here on my mountain looking out at the springtime.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
so
nice.
You're in North Carolina now?
I'm in North Carolina, northwest Madison County, right next to the Tennessee border, overlooking the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, my gosh.
Cool.
We're hoping to be there. Nancy and I are about to embark on our Love Your Parks tour, where we will be traveling full-time pretty much for the rest of our lives, documenting every park in America. This is our second round doing this, and we are going to be in East Tennessee this year. We're looking at early fall, but you never know when we might just do a detour, but so that we can go to the Smoky Mountains. And I believe you know all about hiking in the Smoky Mountains. You talk about it in Child of the Woods.
Well, yes, I've had the great advantage of being born here in this part of the country and having the Smoky Mountains kind of as my backdrop, although it was a little bit of a drive, but home is similar enough to the Smokies so that I felt like I was there, have been there for the majority of my life. And please call me when you're in East Tennessee. I would love to welcome you here.
Oh, we'd love that. We'd love to meet with you. And I really have been enjoying Child of the Woods. We're enjoying your music. My gosh, that's like
it's fun.
It's
I love
so
it.
cool. It's just you have through your music. Now we haven't tasted your food yet, but the music through your music and your writing really create a sense of place. You know, as soon as I started reading Child of the Woods, I'm like, I am there. I see every blade of grass that you're talking about. I see the snakes, the copperheads. I can smell the smells, and I think that is something so special when someone writes in that way, but doesn't overwrite it. So that you're right there, you feel it, and there's just a lot of observation. And I think that's such a beautiful childhood that you had, where you're able to have that and be out in nature, where you're not connected to a phone, where so many kids are now, which isn't. There's not really, it's going to happen, but it would just be so nice if kids had that experience like you did and I did as a child, running around wild and understanding nature and learning what to be scared of and, be observant of.
Well, thank you for that tribute. That's beautifully said. And it is an interesting thing to think about in this time when most of our children are attached to a screen right in front of their face the majority of the time, and that's the way they experience things. It's an interesting challenge to figure out how to help them translate that into actually the physical touch and the physical sensations and actually smelling what's in front of them and feeling that great space and the quietness around them. And that's something that you and I gather, share in our past experience that is disappearing for a lot of people. So I count myself exceedingly lucky and hope by this final publishing of this book, which is actually a collection of stories that I wrote 25 years ago and never knew if it was going to see the light of day. Amazingly, some things do to see the light of day after 25 years, so I'm grateful to Hatherleigh-Press for that. But times were different then, and times were certainly different when I was a child here, and we didn't have the same kinds of distractions that the young people of today have. So I'm hoping that this will be an encouragement for people to actually just go find a patch of woods and walk around and let whim carry them through, and if not, then just to live vicariously through someone else, as we do when we watch a movie and as young folks do when they watch whatever kind of videos are at their fingertips on their cell phones.
Yeah, it's just not the same, though, is it?
Well, you can still watch your cell phone when you're out in forest if you happen to be in an area of the country that gets cell receptions. You can do both at once.
Yeah, yeah. To me, I think, it's just getting back to our sensibilities. It's even, when you listen to your music, it's so beautiful because it's acoustic and it's like real instruments, because sometimes we're losing those too. Tell us a little bit about the start of that for you, because, I was reading, about the different musicians in your book and the different characters. Not only do you talk about nature, and I'm calling it in the backwoods, nature, but you had some interesting characters, and so you brought in a lot of the history of the area as well. So did that kind of inspire you? Because when you think about Appalachia, and it is Appalachia, right?
Oh, you said Appalachia, absolutely right. Seguret, I told you it rhymes with hooray, and I think you were thinking it rhymed with hurrah, so it's Seguret instead of Segura, but that's the only detail.
I'll get one right.
Exactly right.
Okay, so yeah, Seguret. Okay, that's right, because I went hurrah in my mind too. I'm like, hurrah! Okay, so Seguret, everybody, Seguret. So I can spell. There you go, because it's in front of me. But yeah, Appalachia. Always, we've done a number of interviews over the years over the, covering the Appalachian Trail, and everyone is saying, yeah, it's about, throwing Appalachia. And I don't know. As soon as I hear of Appalachia, I always think of like Grandma Gatewood, and because she's just like that iconic, amazing woman who just carried on walking.
Absolutely.
But those characters, you have them in your stories, and so did the music come through for you from that? I mean, even just the traditions, the Celtic traditions that run through the forests and the mountains out there.
Well, I was incredibly rich and fortunate once again that my parents chose before my birth to come to this area. They were both from the north, hence my accent, which is a little diluted by having lived in France for 20 years also. They were both from the north, and they fell in love with the mountains and the music, and they looked on the map to see where the highest mountains were. They'd heard that the best music came from this area of the country, and they wound up in Madison County completely by chance and their daring. So my father's main interest was music, and he went around seeing if he could meet local musicians and learn from them. He was not a collector per se. He just loved the music and wanted to learn it directly from folks. So when collectors did start flocking into the area, they called my father, and we hosted the New Lost City Ramblers and a lot of other folks who were coming in to record the ballad singers from Madison County, which, if anybody has ever watched Songcatcher or, of course, Oh Brother, or various other films of that ilk, have clips of Madison County folks in them, and it's pretty much the story of Madison County. So this is a rich area for music, certainly for culinary exploit, very earliest culinary memory, or the richest culinary memory, besides eating a radish, which burned the heck out of my mouth when I was 2 years old, was a hog killing time here in the house where I live currently, actually, the house of an old couple who have since passed on, and I get to carry on their legacy here. And what a richness with the locally grown vegetables, everything flavored with hog. Now we have the addition of ramps that we dig out of the forest and morels that we find when we forage in the forest. And it all weaves together. I've spent a good bit of my life trying to reconcile the connection between music and food, because those are my two principal passions besides writing. And so I think about all the ways in which they are related, which is one of the reasons why there are so many references to songs in my cookbooks, and a lot of those are detailed, and the words are included in Appalachian Appetite, the recipe book, which is recipes from up and down the Appalachian chain from Mississippi to Maine. And ironically on that, my son was hiking the Appalachian Trail at the same time as I was writing that. So I was really thinking about that specific stretch of the Appalachian Trail.
Neat. How interesting. I mean, because, the music, the food, but this is, again, it's really like integrity to the land and culture, and heritage, and keeping, the past alive and not forgetting that. And I think that's really exciting to hear about, the vegetables too. Hog killing is like crazy. I remember in South Africa, we stayed in a place called Cramond, And we lived in this old farmhouse that had no water. And if you did turn the water on, water from, I don't know how it came in, tadpoles came out. But the one bedroom used to be a chicken coop. So, like, anyway, it's one of those things. And there was no electricity, and we had a generator in the back. And if you turned it on, you had to go through the wasp nest. It was just one of these interesting times of life. And we were in a farming area, and they were growing strawberries and sugarcane, cabbage and oranges. And I remember, running around there and just that whole feeling. But I remember running, with my friends and going around the corner to where the one farmhouse is, and there was the pig hanging upside down, and it was a bloody mess, actually, what was going on there. And I remember being in shock and just, I wanted to save the pig. And so for you, did you get it? Did it just be part of normal lifestyle, or did you ever have that, like, oh no, like the dead cow that you found?
Well, I did write a chapter about the hog killing process, because that was a fascinating part of daily life, and it was one of the big events of the year. And the great thing is, as children, we have a different eye on the world than adults, and so we're seeing it at another altitude. We were several feet lower than the adults are, and so we see a different angle, and we haven't yet learned to filter all of our thoughts in the same way that adults have. So I pretty much took it for granted because it's something I'd known since day one, but certainly if you hadn't known that since day one, it might have had a different effect.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you and Nancy the bunnies.
Oh, the bunnies! I love it.
Yeah, the bunnies. You both have that in common.
Man, they work fast.
I know. So, you have a whole farm. So, yeah, the bunnies coming out. I remember when we were in South Africa we were on a tour there, and there was this area, Tabazimbi. We stayed on a farm there too, and it also generator and everything, and it was almost like being, they were the music was more like two-step and concertinas, and they did play fiddles, and on Saturday evenings, families would get together and dance, and then either dance in front of the TV, which was Lawrence Welk style, or they'd be like a barn dance. And I remember that one time they went out, and the farmer came up to the window of our room and went, "Dinner," and he's holding bunnies. And we're like, oh. It's like, oh, wakey, this is how we eat. And so, then the bunny I was looking at on my walk in the morning was now on my plate.
I have a similar memory from here. As a child, we went to visit a fiddler in a neighboring part of the county, and the woman of the house wanted to fix a chicken for dinner, so her husband Arthel went out, and he just slowly reached down and he grabbed one, and he took it by the head, and he swung it round and round and round, and by the time he got to his wife at the door, it wasn't breathing anymore, and he handed it to her and said, "Here, Mary Jo," and she took it and put it on the plate.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow. And living without electricity and running water, it's so interesting now, because if, the electricity goes out for 10 minutes, everybody freaks out, How can the electricity go out? And, what do you mean they're turning off the water to do, maintenance or repairs? So do you get like that, or are you still like, we have running water? This is amazing.
Well, it's something I never take for granted, and I think it's a great disservice that most of our children don't learn what to do when there is a power outage. It cripples people, and it shouldn't be that way, because these natural skills of dealing with natural elements are something that it should be inherent. I think it should be taught to everyone. And to that note, I will mention a fellow named Eustace Conway. I don't know if you're familiar with Turtle Island Preserve, which is in Boone, North Carolina. And he was written about by, dear, memory lapse here. I've reached that age. Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert, yeah.
Yes, Elizabeth Gilbert. Yes, so he was written up by her in a book called The Last American Man, and what he strives to do is teach young children of today how to live exactly in those situations, as the Indians did long ago. So that is something that's possible in Boone, North Carolina. Turtle Island Preserve, I'll give them a little plug because they do something which is very near and dear to my heart, which is pass on these old ways that some of us take for granted, but that nobody really takes for granted anymore.
I think it's important, and when you think about the Appalachian area and the trail, and some of the interviews we've done over the past is in regards to protecting the mountains, of the coal side of things. There's the coal, but then there's also the encroaching industry coming up into the mountains. Do you feel that that's something that threatens the region?
Well, certainly. We just are in the midst right now of a discussion in our county of whether or not to bring in an asphalt plant. And I think that it's going to be vetoed, but were it brought in, it would likely contribute to a good bit more pollution and certainly visual pollution in our landscape. And it's a conundrum because we have to keep people working and we do need roads. But do we want to put an asphalt plant right in the middle of one of the most beautiful counties of western North Carolina? It's
no.
I think we need to have dirt roads. I'm fine with dirt roads, Yeah, I'm all cool with that. Okay, so now running around, this is the coolest thing as kids. We find everything fascinating, and we'll swim in areas. I mean, you were talking about swimming, and in these, it's like I want to call a watering hole, but I have different terms, but. We've done that, and I've had an eel hang on to my cheek. Basically, something felt like it was pinching my butt underwater. It turned out to be this giant eel, and I'm not kidding about giant. This thing was a monster, and it kept sucking onto my cheek, and because it does that. It was freaky, and when I'm reading your book, I'm like, is an eel going to pop out of there?
Yeah.
Did you have eels in those watering areas? Water areas, and
I've not run across eels, but I've certainly been pinched by crawfish when I put my toes into the stream.
Yeah.
And crawfish and various different fish, and I've encountered snakes that slither off the bank into the water where I was swimming, and
that's creepy.
had visions of what might happen, but it never has. Beyond a few pinches by the crawfish. So here we are. Both of us are alive. We've lived. We've done adventurous things, and we're still here to tell the tale.
See, but don't you love it when things like that? I mean, we just had a really crazy rattlesnake encounter that we almost got ourselves into big trouble. And afterwards, we thought it was the coolest thing ever. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, isn't that about us having that connection with nature and having that adrenaline rush and that getting back to our purest, most primal senses when things like that happen?
Sure. Well, you can cross the street in New York City and put yourself in as much danger as passing in front of a rattlesnake.
I'll do the snake. I'll go for the snake.
Yeah.
They're pretty. But okay, the snake thing though was interesting to me. I know you've talked about the copperheads. And then I love that one part you were talking, in one story you were talking about, and the one stick moved. Out comes the shotgun, But you talked about the cobras in the app. You have cobras in America.
Oh! I was talking about a cobra worm. It's a
cobra
worm
That's what I was
about
thinking.
an inch and a half long.
Yeah, because I've seen things like that and I was like, so it is an actual worm, but they look like a snake, like a cobra snake at their head, right?
They do, yes.
And they stink.
Ooh,
exactly.
Weird.
I haven't seen one in many years, but and it's one of the things I tuned into when I was at that level of close to the ground.
See, that's the thing, the difference between growing up in the city and growing up in the country, or at least where you had the freedom to be outside more than inside, during daylight hours. And, as kids, like you were saying, they're at a different altitude and they see things that we walk right by. Yeah, and you miss all those experiences that help you solve problems later in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you don't have the opportunity to be in nature when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nature helps, but I don't know if you ever read Annie Dillard, and her pilgrim at Tinker Creek and her stories about growing up in Pittsburgh. But you can grow up in a city and you can see the cracks in the sidewalk and the dandelions growing out of the cracks in the sidewalk and pennies that people lose on the street that nobody else bothers to pick up. And it can be equally as fascinating.
It's about being observant.
Yes.
And dandelions will grow where they want to.
And they're not.
And we need to not kill them. They're good for our bodies.
They're good for you.
Yeah,
well,
they're good
so speaking of dandelions, one of the things that I do regularly here in the mountains is lead a foraging cooking dining experience. I do that the last Saturday of every month on the farm here in Madison County in North Carolina, and we start out walking around and collecting whatever wild edibles that we find in season at the moment, dandelions being soon to poke out along with ramps and morel mushrooms and all kinds of other wild greens like turkey's foot, which is green on the top and purple on the bottom and has a delightful peppery flavor. So these are things that it's good for us all to know about, in case we should ever be stranded and need to look next door or in the cracks of the sidewalk for what we can next put in our mouths.
So when we come out your way, can we go on a cooking adventure with you, or a foraging adventure, and do like a little video and learn?
Cool.
I want to learn. To me, it's interesting because it's so different. And, remember watching the movie Into the Wild, one of my most favorite movies, and I mean, I started reading it in a bed and breakfast once, and then I had to leave, and I need to go get the book again. But it's, and Christopher McCandless, just decided I'm not being part of society. I'm going to just live free, and ended up in Denali National Park, living in that old school bus, and he died eating the wrong berry.
Yep.
And it was like,
yes,
no,
I recall
really?
that.
Yeah, and it's like
that was a sad ending.
Yeah.
However, you could
yeah.
die of food poisoning eating mayonnaise from, your local fast food restaurant.
Like,
This is
see,
true.
this is true. She's like, I'm standing up for the berries. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's important to know. A lot of times, I remember when we hiked up in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, and being with friends who knew, they were like, oh, this is a huckleberry. And now you can, you're out in nature. You're in the clean, fresh air. So here's your huckleberry, and it tasted good. And then you knew, oh, we could eat some of these as we go. And that was the coolest
experience. But you have to know the difference between huckleberries and pokeberries, because pokeberries are lookalikes and they're poisonous.
Oopsie.
Okay, I'm coming to hang out with you. See, that's the thing. You got to have the instruction before you just start munching on things.
Yeah, you can't just start eating. Although I always wondered, the Native Americans, somebody had to be the first one to go, oopsie, don't eat that.
Yeah.
True. Well, that's where bitterness comes into effect, because bitterness is a natural warning from poisonous plants. Of course, we've come to cultivate a taste for bitterness. I personally love bitterness. I love beer. I'm experimenting with cooking with hops at the moment, since I'm speaking about that next weekend at the Hop Growers Conference in Asheville. In any case, that's certainly a bitter element that we have grown accustomed to. But bitterness generally, when you taste food from the wilds, does indicate a possibility of toxicity.
Okay.
So if you're experimenting with tasting, just taste a tiny little bit and maybe spit it out, and then examine what happens on your tongue and see if it makes you want to eat more or less.
Your tongue falls off.
Chances are you won't die from just a tiny little speck.
I want to go back to Child of the Woods and Appalachian Odyssey, your book. Do you, see yourself doing any book club events and things like that, so that people can, connect with you, even if it's over Skype or something, so they can, have a conversation with you about Appalachian life?
Well, I will definitely be doing some book tour appearances. I have a few things coming up at actually at my local general store this Sunday, Old Creek General Store, for anybody who's listening in from Madison County area, which is not likely, but you never know. And Peacock Harper Society at the Roanoke Country Club on April 5th. I believe that may be a private dinner. I'll be at Trail Fest in Hot Springs on April 22nd if you happen to be in the area at that time, and that's actually playing music for the Appalachian trail hikers that that come through hot springs at that time of the bubble of the trail hike. And then, of course, I do, besides the monthly foraging events, I teach a yearly week-long intensive cooking class at Warren Wilson College outside of Asheville, and that will be this year, July 28th through August 3rd, and that brings in a lot of the chefs and experts from the Asheville area, chefs, brewers, and vintners, and we have different chefs giving hands-on intensive classes every day, and we do foraging hikes through the woods, and we weave music into the event as well. So those are week-long, but with the option of coming by the day or by the session. Then I also do sessions in Ithaca in the fall, Sonoma in the winter, and Paris in the spring on demand, and those are all visible at schoolofculinaryarts.org if anybody's interested in tuning into that.
Cool. So, Sonoma.
Busy.
I love Sonoma. And then when you talk about Paris and France, so you lived over there for 20 years. What was it like in regards to, you talk about, and we always think about France and how they're foraging and eating fresh and, garden to plate and, just a very good quality of life. And so when you go from, Appalachian country to France, did you feel at home in that way, in that regard?
Absolutely, yes. Well, I had grown up with vegetables right out my back door, so I knew what they looked like. I didn't necessarily know what to do with them. That's the conundrum, and that's what I learned from my experience living in France, was what to do with anything that surprises you and comes your way that might be put onto the plate. So I would say some of the things that we have in common between Appalachia and France are a use of fat with abandon, be it butter or hog grease or, of course, goose fat in the southwest of France, which makes everything taste more delicious. And because folks in Appalachia tend to be people who work and walk, they don't build up the fat that other people might if they lived in cities and ate the same diet. So this is something about France and in Europe in general, is that people walk a lot more than Americans. So they can eat more satisfying meals. And it all boils down to balance between various different elements of taste. So I think if you have a meal that is comprised of a sweet element, a salty element, a bitter element, a sour element, a pungent element, you're satisfied by the end of the meal. You don't want to go out and snack 5 minutes later. But if you eat low-fat yogurt, you're not going to be satisfied in the same way. So it's really important to satisfy all the senses when you eat, I think. And you can tailor down the size of your portions, but if you have all those senses covered, likely you will have also gotten the vitamins that you need to go about your day and your life.
Very good. That makes sense about, if you're going to be living in this way, this mode, versus if you're not walking, then you're going to have to change what you eat. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
But that does bring me to a final conversation here is about walking. We actually even have a 1-hour walk Facebook group because from our first tour, we realized, that, people think about national parks as like if you're going to go into a national park, you're going to have to backpack for 3 nights or a week into the wilderness, and that's, it couldn't be further than the truth. You can do that, but there's also little short trails, little nature walks. There's something for everyone and everyone's athletic ability. And so part of that was we wanted people to realize you can take a 1-hour walk in these grand places, However, taking a 1-hour walk is really good for your body. I know Dr. Jackie Ubani is our heart doctor on our shows, and she's like, you need to have 150 minutes a week of it, minimum, to maintain health, good health for your heart. So we said, okay, we're going to get everyone to go out and take a 1-hour walk if it's in their neighborhood, in any kind of park, downtown, and also to be observant. And that goes with what you do foraging-wise and how your lifestyle was in, as growing up in the Appalachian country, you're observant and being outside and seeing all these things. So there's so many benefits. So I want to know, if you could take a 1-hour walk anywhere in Madison County or the Appalachian area, where would you go? And who would you take with you? Who would you want, anyone alive or passed on, just to spend that time with? And we're going to have to ask what's in your picnic basket, or are you just going to forage on the way?
That's a really good question. Given a different day, I might give a different answer. But today,
sure.
If I were walking for an hour, and probably every day my answer would be this, I would walk around the perimeters of the property that I grew up on. I grew up on a 200 and some acre farm, and it is a lot of steep wooded land, and then there are areas where there are long views of the Tennessee-North Carolina border. So you go from that woodland stream and waterfalls out into open fields and sunshine, and then back down into the mystery of the woods again. And, wow, who would I take with me? There are lots of people I'd like to take with me. Usually when I go walking, I actually like to go alone because it's time to think, time to tune in to what's around me. It's time to empty my brain for the next task at hand. I've so often gone out with children, of course, having my own children. I love going out with the people that come for my culinary classes and showing them what hides in the woods. And if I took a picnic basket along with me, it would probably be very simple. It would be one of the local brews from around Asheville, and we are lucky to have lots of craft brewers here, possibly a bottle of wine, depending on who my company might be. And this is what I miss about France. If I were in France, I would have a baguette and a saucisson, a very nice dry sausage that you just slice up on the spot, and some good French cheese. Here, I make a wonderful quick bread, and the recipe for that is an Appalachian appetite. You can stir it up and have it ready to go in within a half an hour or 45 minutes, and you can even put beer in it and use that for leavening.
Oh, cool.
So I would have some good bread and butter, and maybe if I had some local cold cuts, I would maybe bring that along, but I'd also have a basket and a knife and a brush, and I'd look for wild mushrooms that I wouldn't eat on the spot because they need cooking, but I'd pick wild greens as I went and eat turkey's foot and dandelions and violets and spring beauties and ramps and whatever else I find in the forest at the moment.
Wow. I want to go walking with you. It sounds like a feast.
Eat while you walk.
I know. This is a great way to do it. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show, and I'm just enjoying Child of the Woods, and I hope everyone goes and gets this book, and I want to see it in the hands of as many kids as well. I think the younger generation will delight in this. All ages will really enjoy this. I'd like to see it in schools, too, especially in schools. So Child of the Woods, an Appalachian Odyssey. You can get it now. It's Author-Susi-Gott-Seguret. How about that?
Yes.
Getting that
Thank
part?
you, Lisa. Thank you, Nancy. It was my pleasure.
Okay. So, everyone, it's Seguret. So Susi-Gott, and that's Susigott.com. You can go to our website, obviously Amazon, and also Hatherleigh-Press. You can get it there. And we want to thank the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association for sponsoring today's segment. You can go to their website, ifwtwa.org. And hey, everyone, you need to go meet Susie in North Carolina and go write about her. How about that? It's a great connection there. We're going to close with your song Ripshin, and we were playing Carolina before and Ripshin now. And so who are you performing with on these songs?
On that particular album, that came out in 1999, and that was recorded half in France with Parisian artists and half in Nashville with Nashville artists. So I composed most of the songs, and I was playing with my then husband, I shall say my husband, and various friends of ours from that era of time. So it was a treat to get to do those particular tunes, and most of them were born from reminiscences of the places that mean the most to me here in Appalachia.
Awesome.
Nice.
Here it is, everybody. Ripshin. Take care, Susie.
Bye-bye, Susie.
Thank you so much.